Welcome to Sprinkled with Hope with your host Shane, and we have an awesome episode. We are so excited to present this to you today.
Yes, we have a friend of mine that I've known for met him a couple of years ago. His name is Henry Ammar. He's a musician. He's a life coach. He does masterminds, and he also has a podcast as well, Making It Happen. So after you check ours out, I would check his out as well. Here we go with our amazing guest, Henry Ammar.
Welcome to the Sprinkled with Hope podcast.
This is Jason. And this is Shane.
And it's podcast time.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us. We have an awesome guest with us, Henry Ammar. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We're gonna talk about confidence. So I have a question right off the bat, Henry. Can you tell us a time when you maybe lacked confidence and what you did to overcome it?
The story of the beginning half of my life. I call myself the most insecure person I'd ever known. My nickname was actually Passive because I would never want to say how I really felt because I cared about, being approved. And so I think a long time in my life, I lived a life of like insecurity, and ultimately it's fear, right? Fear shows up as fear of failure, fear of success, insecurity. I mean, I can go on. I have a list of 65 ways as I go around and speak across the world. I kind of look at patterns, and I see what patterns people are running, and the root is fear, but it shows up in different ways. And so in the late teenage years, I was like, man, I just hated feeling caged because when you're living in fear, you kind of feel like you're in a cage. And so I decided to have courage because I realized courage can become confidence, and that's courage to ask the right questions. And so someone put a book in front of me, and then it just kind of made me realize, wow, like I can evolve, I can grow. And so I got on this crazy personal development journey and just ran with it, and read every book I could, asked people questions, had the courage to like ask people that were confident, like, why are you confident? And went to seminars, hired coaches, like did all the things that you could do because I realized, man, if one person is confident, then we're all doing this, we're all, human beings, and we adapt. It's just a matter of what belief systems I create growing up or what belief system that I inherit from my family. So literally I would walk in a room and just worry what everybody thought about me. Never felt like I belonged in a room that I went into. I always wanted to make just share my honest thoughts, but I was always so afraid because I didn't want to be disapproved of or whatever that was. So, I can, when you ask that question, it's like, wow, like that's like literally I look back and I'm like, I hear stories and I watch videos. And I'm like, holy cow. And that was me, man. I was I ran that programming for a really long time.
Question kind of hit home, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us lack that confidence, and you are a really busy man right now. You're doing some great things. So
Thanks.
it sounds like what you did, you read books, you went to seminars. Now you're doing all of that stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, all of us have a hero's journey, right? Like we all experience difficulties in our life, and the goal when you overcome it, you gain the wisdom that comes from overcoming that particular trial or opposition or whatever you want to call it. And mine happened to be a lot. And so like my thing is like I always said, if I could do it, anybody could do it. Like truthfully, like it sounds crazy because people see me and they're like, there's no way, man. Like you were on stage in front of 35,000 people, like just ripping it open. I'm like, yeah, but like, if I could do that, anybody can. And it's funny, I was on a podcast. One of my friends from like literally back in the day when I was a teenager, she had a podcast and she's like, can I please have you on here? And I was like, sure, I'm going to be in LA. So I drove by her place and she goes, okay, what happened to you? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, do you remember how insecure you were? And I was like, please tell me more. People don't know that part about me. And she goes, you were on a bus going to Jessica Simpson's birthday party. Like, I don't know if you know who Jessica Simpson is, but, and you were like this guy, you were still nice, but like, I remember we got off the bus and I was like, hey, Henry, go sing. And you're like, no, what are people going to say about me if I did? And I mean, I look at you now and she's like, what the heck happened? And I was like, thank you. And I was like, can you please tell everybody the way I was? Because people don't understand that it's possible to change. It's possible to grow into, you know, who we want to become and create. And so, you know, I divert a little bit, but for me, it's like that I teach it because I experienced it. And I think all of us have a hero's journey in front of us. And when we learn to overcome it and learn to transcend, you know, remove those things that are not love or not truth in our life, and we step into who we really are, I think there's an innate desire to go back and help the people that can. And so for me, it's like, how do I take the 20 years of knowledge that I've gained and put it into programming that helps people get there faster than it took me? And, you know, and I love it. I love seeing the breakthroughs, and, you know, I love helping people be liberated. So yeah, it's what I do. It's what I love. And, you know, just kind of tuning into making an impact in the world the best I can.
Henry, I love your story. I really, you're such an inspiration because of where you came from, right? And the things that you had to overcome. And do you think it was because of your limiting beliefs in yourself at the time?
100%. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. We all run programming, right? And limiting beliefs started off as a limiting decision. At one point in our life, or in our ancestors' life, like, a decision was made, right? Like, something happened and I made a decision, and it perpetuated into a belief. And, you know, most of the world, a lot of people don't believe they're enough, or don't feel lovable or loved or whatever. Like, there's always this like lack. And 100%, man, I think that it's good to understand the difference between, you know, Alison Armstrong calls it the human animal and the human spirit, right? Like the mind, right? The mind is not who I am, but it has beliefs and patterns it runs to keep me safe. Right? Those beliefs kept me safe at one point. I believed I had to believe them for a reason. We could dive in and nerd out over it, but I mean, 100%. I think that there's trauma or belief systems that we carry in our past that we continue to put into our lives that don't serve us anymore, or serve our higher purpose, right?
Right.
So
yeah,
I mean, we can go on about it. It's just like, I just think there's so much power in everybody, and creating a lovingly self-aware space in our mind, and understanding we have this power of choice, in that just because my past was a certain way doesn't mean my future has to be a certain way. Just because I formulated a belief one way means I could formulate a belief another way. You know,
right.
So I just got obsessed with it, man. This is what I love. I love to liberate. I love to grow myself. I mean, it's a constant work in progress, and I got to find joy in the journey, because I'm always going to be evolving. I just broke through another belief like a few weeks ago, and I was like, whoa, I didn't know I held on to that, you know? And so it's so fun. It's so cool. And when I find it, I don't beat myself up over it, because where focus goes, energy flows. And if I'm looking at problems that I'm having in my life, or looking at negative belief patterns, yes, it's not a like, let's ignore what's happening, because I'm all about truth, but I'm also about love, and I'm also about loving myself where I'm at and getting really excited about who I'm becoming. You know,
I love
there's
that.
so much joy in growth, man. Like, I get to create whatever I want. Are you kidding me? Like, so I got to get out of survival mode and get into creation mode.
That's so cool. You have a lot of great insight. You know, you've talked about how you have evolved and you're developing. Can you tell us a time when maybe somebody that you spoke to, you saw the change in them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Holy cow. I had a girl in my mastermind, a lady. She's incredible. She's about 50. She just turned 50. And it was amazing, man. Like, the very first time she was ever at one of my digital events, she wouldn't turn on a camera. And then, you know, she's doing a mastermind and her camera's on, she's talking. And finally, like, we went through all these processes, and she goes, Henry, this was the greatest comment. I literally, like, love it. She goes, I feel like I was in a coma for 45 years, and then I woke up in Disneyland. And I was like, that may be the best comment I've ever heard about a transformation. But she's like, I look and life looks different to me, and there's so many things I want to do, and man, like, the world just opens up. And it's so true. Once we get out of our head and we get into who we are in creation, it's like, my gosh, the possibilities are endless. And freedom, you know, as Jason knows, because Jason's a part of it, it's like, you know, I created this thing called the Freedom Generation that changes the world. And freedom is when you have the choice, and you have the power to go whatever direction you want and create whatever influence you want. And so I think there's beauty in liberating ourselves to see all the endless possibilities. Because when you're living in that fearful state or the lack of confidence or, the tunnel vision, you lose possibility because you're living in a cage of that thing. But when you liberate yourself, like that lady said, she goes, man, I woke up and I feel like I'm in Disneyland. And I think life can be that, right? Like, and it's not always Disneyland. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, things get tough, and we have emotions. Like today is my mother's birthday, and my mother passed away 4 years ago, and I miss her, right? That doesn't change the emotional state of those things in my life, right? However,
Right.
I can choose how I react to them. I could choose who I become from them. There's some things I cannot control, but what I can control, I will. And I can control me, and I can control who I become from it. Because if I'm going to go through it, I'm going to grow through it. And to me, the serenity prayer is one of the things I live by is God grant me the peace, the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and that's myself, and the wisdom to know the difference. Like when my mother was diagnosed with cancer, I couldn't change that, but I could change how I showed up for her. And when she passed away, I'm posting about it today. And maybe by the time this podcast is released, it'll be days before, but to where I said, like when she passed away, I said, Henry, you have to make a decision right now. And I said, because what decision you make right now will affect the rest of your life. So I looked at my mother and I said, Mom, I will honor your life with how I live mine. And
I love that.
And so like that
so cool.
decision drives me. And like I vow to live a life of service and love and light and honoring the sacrifices that have been made before me, and to liberate myself. So one day when I do have kids and a family, I can do the same for them,
Yeah, I love that so much, Henry. I'm sure your mom's looking down on you right now, just with a proud heart and
thank you.
Just, absolutely loving the person you've become and where you're headed, right? Because we're just starting this freedom generation journey.
Yeah.
And we've got so much ahead of us, right, to look forward to. And I love being a part of that. So tell me, you got this event coming up at the end of this month. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? And
Yeah. I created an event called Unstoppable Confidence because I feel like when people really understand their gifts, and it's to really help people get on a journey of creating their own confidence, right? And a journey of courage and self-awareness and a journey of liberation, right? And so I love this stuff. I did a retreat in Bali for 9 days and I had to cross content out because I've been studying so much, and I'm like, I literally love this stuff. And and so it's a matter of helping people get into a space of their own confidence, of taking charge of their own life. Because my thing is, I remember when my mother, and it's funny, I probably talked to my mom a lot. It's her birthday today. I remember looking at my mom when we're in the hospital. I said, what do I really want to say when it's my time? What do I want to say I did in the world and I gave back in the world? Because most of us don't think about that. And I just want to empower people to be confident in their own ability. Because look, I'm not you and you're not me. I don't have your experiences and gifts and talents and strengths, and you're going to touch people that I can't. People are listening to this podcast that don't listen to mine, right? And there'll be crossover. But the reason why I created the Freedom Generation was because it enables everybody to lift where they stand and empower where they are. Because if all of us can collectively just do that where we are, I think it changes everything. And so I just want to empower people to do that within themselves, to hold a mirror to themselves and be able to create powerful experiences and create processes for them. And I'm a nerd. I studied so many different modalities. I'm a master practitioner of neurolinguistic programming and all these other things. And it's at these events, we dive in a little bit deeper than I can at my content because we'll do some, guided subconscious meditative processes and help people create systems for themselves. So I'm really, really excited about my events and my masterminds and the things that could really dive deep in, because I love to facilitate real transformation, not just inspiration,
Right.
Yeah, that really is part of the reason why we started this podcast and this journey in the first place is we want to, we've learned some things in life and we just want to bring that passion and that drive and that love to other people, just like you are. You're such an inspiration, man.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate you guys, what you do. And honestly, we're all in this together, right? We're all just doing what we can do where we are, and I appreciate you guys doing this podcast. I mean, the fact that you're doing it it just shows your heart, and you could be doing anything else, but you obviously want to give back. So I appreciate what you do.
Yeah, we really do want to give back. We started it about a month ago, so we're really new into this, but we're seeing some great things already.
Awesome.
It's been really fun to see.
It takes courage, man, because I remember when I launched my podcast, like I had nobody listening for the first like few months, and I was like, do I keep going? And you're like, yeah, like, and then I literally paused for like a month and a half and said, what do I really want to add value to? And I came back a month and a half later, I was like, and you just keep pivoting, and you go back and hear my first episode, and I'm like, wow. At one point I was like, do I delete it? A long time ago. And I was like, no, like I got to leave the evolution so people can see. There was no intro. My artwork was funny. Like it was just all hilarious. And I was doing the best I could, but it was awesome. Like, and I look back, I don't even know how many episodes in I am right now. I think I'm at like, I don't even know, to be honest, but it's fun.
A lot.
Yeah. It's a fun process.
That's cool.
Yeah, that is awesome. You've been working with Bo Lotto a lot.
I love that guy.
The neuroscientist. Do you want to share some of the stuff you've learned from him about, confidence and building up that and what holds us back?
Bo's awesome, man. We're actually creating a campaign together to launch it in the Freedom Group. It's going to be a collaboration between the Freedom Generation and the Lab of Misfits, which is his company. And we literally were on the panel today together. Dude, that guy's freaking brilliant, man. I love that guy. And it's fun to pitch and catch with him. I told him we need to record all of our conversations because we end up just talking philosophy a lot, or like truth. But a big thing that he studies is certainty. And he says there's too much certainty in the world. People want certainty, and we need to be able to experience life outside of certainty and create awe and adventure out of it. So his thing was like, how do you create awe and adventure in uncertainty? And that was just really cool to look at. Like, people feel confident in things that they're certain in. But what if you could find joy and growth in awe being AWE, in that uncertainty? He dives into that. He's really, really cool. And so that's a lot of his stuff. And it's just really cool. And he talks about play and talks about the gift of play and seeing things that way. I could dive into his work, but he's so brilliant, man. And so I'm excited to launch this thing together. And the first campaign we're launching, I don't know if it's going to stick with this, but it's going to be about being real, which helps people become authentic and self-honest, and also find adventure in being authentic, in honesty. And so it's going to be fun to create with him something along those lines to help people really understand the power of authenticity and the power of being real with yourself and being honest with yourself, and also just showing up in the world in that way, in an adventurous way, and being kind to yourself and to others and to the world,
Yeah, I think that's what really draws people to us, is us being real.
100%.
That's why we're talking to you, because we see the realness in you. We see that you're authentic, and we love that. We want to be part of that, and hopefully people see that in what we're talking about, that we're not just making this stuff up, that we are who we are, and we want to share that with others.
Yeah, I love that. And then I love that you do that. I think it's beautiful, man. It's really, really cool.
Yeah. So I just have one last question, and it doesn't really relate to confidence, but it's the opposite, which is fear. And how do we overcome that fear? What are things that we can do to overcome fear, to go after what we really want?
I think it's beautiful to make fear your ally in a sense, right? Because the cool part about fear is the fact that like emotions are indicators, and when we feel an emotion, we need to understand that we're not that emotion. I am not sad. I am feeling sad. I am not afraid, or anger is a form of fear or whatever. Like, I am not angry. I'm feeling angry, right? And so I think there's beauty in those things. And I think it's understanding first that emotions are indicators, and that there's beauty in understanding that everything is an opportunity to be more liberated. And so I think in that space, I think that we first and foremost need to understand, like, fear, there's two types of fear. Fear that keeps you alive, which is important. And to me, fear that keeps you from living. And the fear that keeps you from living, you can transcend it and have it become your ally to make you even more alive, right? And I think there is an epidemic of fear, and it shows up in so many ways. However, there's also so much liberation in that fear, and so much wisdom in that fear, and so much beauty in that fear. And we just have to make sure that we understand that we aren't the mind, that the mind is a tool, and the fear is there to kind of keep us alive, but sometimes we need to make sure it doesn't keep us from living. So being aware of what's happening, being lovingly self-aware, creating a safe space to understand what it is, and going through the processes of healing whatever it is and reframing whatever. There's so many different modalities we could use to help people transcend fear. But just understanding that when fear shows up, it's just trying to keep you safe. And it's not your enemy, it's trying to keep you safe. However, it can be if you're blinded to it, if you're living on autopilot. But we need to kind of live life very awake and aware, and creating a loving, safe space to look at where we are, because the number one directive of the subconscious mind is to keep you alive. That's the number one directive. So most likely when you're triggered or when you're feeling something, you're not reacting to the present moment, you're actually reacting to the past. And so allowing yourself to go back and look at that past situation from a loving space and understanding what it means and why it's there, and reframing it and creating great relationships around you to keep it safe, because you're not going to do it alone, right? Or doing these programs, going to, whether it's my programs or somebody else's programs, it's like there are ways to transcend it. And I think continually just having courage to look at things in a loving space and being honest, and then moving forward from there. And that's kind of like a quick answer, but just knowing that, like, you have this power of choice, and you could sit and the first question is, am I safe? And if you are, then it's actually understanding what's really happening internally for me at this moment.
That's awesome.
Oh, that is awesome. I love that, Henry. It's just so insightful. I think that, hopefully our listeners are really grasping, how we can move from, having that fear to then being confident, right? And how do you find that there's any particular tools or anything that can move us from that, like allow us to push through that fear and get the confidence that we need?
Yeah, I mean, first just recognize that courage becomes confidence, right? And everything, like, we're the ultimate adaptation machine, right? Like, our brain, yes, when you begin to step out of your comfort zone, it's uncomfortable by default. But the only way through it is through it. You can't avoid it. You can't avoid what you're doing. You have to recreate. You have to create your life and get out of survival. And the funny thing is when I say emotions are indicators, what ends up happening is when you're afraid, there's an internal representation of something going on in your mind. You're seeing something in your mind. Your self-talk is a certain way. Your focus is on a certain thing. And if you can go and become self-aware and become like lovingly self-aware, you can understand what representations you're putting on in your mind, right? Because your subconscious mind does not know the difference between what's imagined and what's real. So for me, decide your day in advance. You know how fear shows up in your life. You know how it is. And so if you could decide in advance and emotionally visualize things, like there's a concept that I created called VIZing, V-I-Z. And so V stands for visualize. Like, what do you like? I do it with my future. What do I see? What do I want to see? Like, I visualize it from a third party objective, and I visualize it when I'm inside. Eyes integrate emotion, because emotion is what wires your subconscious mind the most. Because what happens, the reason why we have these triggers is at one point we had an emotional experience, and your mind took a snapshot of that moment and said, I need to remember this moment because it's important. So I integrate emotion into what it is, and I zoom into it. I experience the experience before I experience it. Because the future, like, sometimes we fear the future. It hasn't happened yet, but you're acting as if it did happen. And sometimes we think about a past moment and it triggers the same emotion as if we're reliving that moment again. It's just an indicator that your subconscious mind does not know the difference between what a vivid imagination, emotional imagination is, and what's real. So we can consciously choose to create these experiences before they actually happen, and decide in advance and create a resistance strategy when it does show up. And then the more you decide, it's like a muscle. Your courage becomes confidence. that's a simple way to do it. Of course, there are deeper ways in neurolinguistic programming to rewire the past, experiences and different things we do when we're doing like deeper processes like the mastermind, and we at the events we touch on them, and when we do coaching we dive deeper into them, and there's a lot of help. And so if you're experiencing like a lot of things, A, be kind to yourself and like have compassion and know the journey, and B, just get involved in programs, go see people that understand how to help you transcend and release that. So there's a lot you can do on your own, and just be patient in the journey, and like be self-loving on the journey, and just know it is a journey. Like I've been doing this work forever, and I mean, I consider myself pretty freaking confident. However, there are moments where I catch myself and I'm like, holy cow, like there's always going to be opportunities to transgress. And as Thomas Hubel said in the panel today, he's like, there are people that like ride the bike to ride the bike, and there are people that ride the bike to get to their destination.
Mm.
And he goes, you need to like ride the bike to ride the bike. Like this is a journey, and we want to reach someplace. But I promise you, like I've had so many wonderful accomplishments, and when you do, the mind is always meant to grow. So you're going to look for the next thing. Like how many of you listening are thinking of one thing you've accomplished, and as soon as you did, you look for the next thing? And it's like, man, like that's not fully living. Living is in this moment now. How do I add value to this moment now? Growth and contribution, right? Like those are two beautiful things that we can put into our lives and implement. How do I contribute? And then how do I grow from these particular moments?
Such great advice. I love it.
Yeah, I do love it. You probably, Henry, have mentors or people that you're surrounded with,
Always.
that help you. Could you touch on maybe a mentor that's kind of helped you through this and kind of got you where you're at?
Oh man, so many people, man. I mean, growing like in a lot of the beginning phases, and I love his work. I think I just like him. I think he's brilliant. I don't know if you knew this, but like I've been at a ton of Tony Robbins events, and I was a coach for his Global Youth Leadership Summit, and I crewed some of his events, and I saw what he did, and I wanted to dive deeper into it, and so I just started going to like different trainings myself, and like so it's a kind of a big combination, but everybody's been a mentor to me. This sounds really silly, but kids are a mentor to me. Like I look at their purity and their honesty and their ability to play and their ability to like just be honest with themselves or me, and that's one. But like Tony Robbins is incredible. Oh gosh, who else? Like I can totally just keep going. I say Tony, he's probably had the biggest impact on me, just because I think to me his live events inspired me to want to do. Like I've always wanted to help people for the past 20 years, right?
Right.
You go to his events, he's done such a good job of curating and helping people subconsciously and helping people, create real change. Cause I think he does that. He's been a mentor to me. Like, it's funny. This is actually a really interesting thought. And I'll kind of leave you with this is like, I think it's Napoleon Hill said that in his mind, he has a council, and he learns the people that he wants advice from, and he learns them really well, reads their biographies. And then when he has a question, he'll go into his mind and pull them forward and ask them the question. And he'll have that conversation with them. And I think it's so brilliant because you don't necessarily need to know somebody for them to be your mentor.
Mm.
They could be your mentors. You look at their content and you're like, what advice would they give? But yeah, spiritually, like for me, like, spirituality is a big foundation in my life. That's a big thing for me. And so I always seek to be as loving as I can, and, building that connection for me, that's number one for me. Man, there's so many people, like literally I flash like people in my mind because for me, life is so, I think there's somebody that's like Tony's strong at certain aspects. Joe Dispenza is strong in certain aspects. Like, if I look at like mentorship in terms of marketing, like you look at someone maybe like a Gary Vee or like, a James Wedmore in some areas, or like there's all these different people that give you pieces and chunks. And I'm just a truth seeker. So wherever I could find truth, whether it's, listening to you guys ask questions, or whether it's sitting on a panel today, or whether it's Tony Robbins, or whether it's, the scriptures or whether it's books or whether it's seminars, like I'm all about it because everybody has something to offer, even if they're not offering it. And you always have something to offer them. And this is a diversion, but there was a guy once when I looked, he was a billionaire on Forbes list, and I won't say his name, but I got an opportunity to sit with him for 15 minutes because I was just hungry for truth. I was like, why? Like, what made him so successful? And I sat in front of him and I said, my question going in wasn't what can I take away? My question was what value can I add this guy? Because I genuinely want to add value everywhere I go. Like people probably take from this guy all the time. I said, yes, I would love to hear his thoughts, but I also want to add value to him. It was funny, man. Like maybe like 10, 15 minutes into it, we're about to wrap. And I learned his life and I asked him questions and I learned that I could do something for his son. And I offered it. And he's like, oh my gosh, like that would be amazing. And he goes, what are you doing for lunch? Do you just want to sit through lunch with me? And I ended up sitting with him for like an hour and a half. And then I ended up going to a concert with his family, And so like the cool thing is like, I didn't go in there with that intent. I went in there trying to add value, seeking to add value and seeking to learn, right? And not take, but give and learn so I can give more. And I think there's beauty in that, in mentorship. Yes, I want to learn from my mentors and I also want to add value to them. I think there's beauty in this synergistic giving relationship.
Yeah, that might be the one thing I take from this discussion. That is really, really good advice. Everything you've talked about ultimately comes down to action. We have to do something in order to get something. Right? We can't just sit back and you wanted to learn. And so you put yourself out there and you went to seminars and did everything. That really is something that I will remember for sure from this discussion. So I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Henry, so much for being a part. And how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks. So you can follow me at anything. It's Henry Ammar, Henry. Last name is Ammar, 2 M's. You can find me on Instagram at Henry Ammar, on Facebook, Henry Ammar. Jason is a part of the Freedom Generation group. We're going to be doing some cool stuff there. So if you go to my business Facebook page, you'll see that there. TheFreedomGeneration.com is something we're launching. So you can go on that. If you listen to my music, I'm on Spotify and Apple Music and all that stuff. So Henry Ammar is on there or whatever. So yeah, anywhere you can find me. My podcast is called Making It Happen with Henry Ammar. So when you're done with listening to this podcast, and if you want some more, you've finished all their podcast episodes, you can jump over to mine and listen to them if you want. So
awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
You are a busy person. We seriously appreciate it.
My pleasure, you guys. Thanks for all you do. Appreciate it. You guys have a good day, and everyone for listening. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate your. It's an investment. It's an act of self-love for you to listen to this podcast. Like for you to listen to this far, 36 minutes in or 30 minutes in, it's like that's so cool that you're listening. So I commend you for that, and you guys have a wonderful day, night, whatever you're listening, morning, and thank you for having me.
Have a blessed day. Thanks,
Thank
Henry.
you, Henry.
Take care. Bye.
All right, brother.
You too.
Bye.
This is Sprinkled with Hope. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend.
If you like our podcast, please give us a review or rating.